It was a bone-chilling winter morning in Joliet, Illinois. The wind rolled down Collins Avenue like a living thing cutting through the alleys, biting at exposed hands, and carrying the damp breath of the Des Plaines River. Inside, bus 24C, heading toward downtown Chicago. 70-year-old Howard Lennox sat silently behind the wheel. His hands, wrapped in old, worn leather gloves, gripped the steering wheel with quiet strength. Each movement he made was slow, not out of weakness, but out of precision. It was as if every turn, every brake, was a decision weighed against memories no one else could see. In the rearview mirror, his eyes were sharp, piercing even, but no one looked up long enough to notice. To them, he was just another old man with silver hair and a hunched back. A relic from another time, too slow, too outdated. As the bus creaked to a stop near Pilcher Park, a few passengers shuffled aboard. They brushed past him like wind past the stone. No greetings, no eye contact, just impatience. One man, in a tailored coat and too much cologne, muttered loud enough for everyone to hear, "Too old to be driving, slower than a damned turtle." Howard said nothing. He nodded once, eyes forward, hands steady. But somewhere inside, behind the stillness, something shifted. Far back in his mind, a memory stirred like light flickering through the fog. A siren, distant but familiar. He tilted his head slightly, adjusting the rearview mirror as if to double-check. Not for traffic, for ghosts. No one noticed. They were too busy scrolling, typing, and mumbling into their phones. In the third row, a young woman with AirPods raised her phone and snapped a photo. Her screen glowed. This driver must be 100. Drives like he's asleep. Who the hell? Let this old man keep working. She posted it with a laugh. A few others chuckled. One man barked into his phone. "Yeah, I'm on the 24C. This guy's crawling. Should have been fired years ago." Howard heard it all. He always did. His hands tightened just slightly on the wheel, not out of anger but endurance, the kind that doesn't flinch anymore. For a brief second, as he adjusted his glove, something slipped into view on his wrist, a tattoo, faded, barely visible, a military insignia that time hadn't erased, only softened. No one noticed. No one cared. The bus moved on, rolling past Jefferson Avenue under a thick gray sky. Low buildings blurred into one another. At one point, a man stood and approached the front. His voice was sharp, condescending. "Hey, old man, can you speed it up? I've got a meeting to catch." Howard turned slowly, just enough for their eyes to meet. Not angry, just precise, cold steel, not rust. The man faltered. His voice dropped to a mutter as he retreated to his seat. The air inside the bus shifted, slightly, unseen, but felt. They didn't know the roads Howard had once driven, the convoys he led under blackouts, the dust-covered trails where one wrong turn meant a dozen lives lost. They didn't know, and they didn't ask. All they saw was age, a man out of place in their fast-moving world. At the next stop, Cass Street Bridge, an elderly woman climbed aboard. Her hands trembled as she counted coins into her purse. Howard waited, patient, calm. A few passengers groaned, sighed, rolled their eyes. But Howard simply nodded at her and waited. She smiled, just barely. It was the only thank you he'd heard that morning, but even that couldn't drown out the voice behind her. He's slowing down the whole damn world. Someone hissed, the engine hummed, the tires turned, and Howard drove on past red brick houses with empty porches, past flickering neon signs from forgotten shops, and deep in his chest, beneath layers of silence and years, no one remembered, something began to rise. A storm, but it stayed buried right where he'd learned to keep it. Bus 24C rumbled down Theodore Avenue as the last light drained from the sky. Joliet faded behind them. Ahead, the Chicago horizon turned a leaden gray, thick with winter air. Inside the bus, Howard Lennox still sat, leather-gloved hands firm on the wheel, gaze locked on the road like a soldier marching toward a silent drum. The passengers had quieted. No more complaints. Just the soft hum of phones and the hollow sound of collective breathing. But beneath that silence, something darker was on its way. The doors hissed open near Hickory Creek Park. 3 men stepped on, black jackets, hats pulled low, no eye contact, no words, no payment. They moved with a quiet certainty, like wolves slipping through a sleeping barn. One of them pulled a gun, small, black, deadly. His voice didn't need to shout. Everybody stay quiet. Phones, now. Screams didn't even have time to bloom. Just the sharp sound of panic curling inward. The girl with the AirPods who had mocked Howard just minutes ago ripped them out and pushed her phone forward, hands shaking. The well-dressed man, still reeking of judgment, now hung his head, sweat dripping from his temple like guilt. Howard didn't flinch, didn't speak. Through the rearview mirror, his eyes traced every angle, every twitch of a finger, every shadow under those ball caps. The robbers thought they controlled the room, but Howard was already scanning and calculating. Then one of them stepped forward, gun pressed into Howard's shoulder. Left. Take the highway. Now. His voice cracked with the kind of fear only masked as control. Howard didn't blink. He nodded once, calm, controlled. All right. He turned the wheel, but not toward the highway. The bus veered down a narrow, cracked road, the kind of road that didn't show up on tourist maps. Potholes are like open wounds, trees clawing at the sky with bare fingers. The GPS chirped once, then died, no signal. It was as if even the machine knew this was no ordinary detour. Whispers rippled through the rows. "Where's he going?" Someone said. "This isn't the highway." The girl from earlier now had her face buried in her palms, murmuring, "He's going to get us killed." But Howard didn't answer. Maybe he didn't hear. Or maybe he'd already heard those words decades ago, under gunfire and foreign skies. His hands moved not like a man escaping, but like a man returning. Every turn of the wheel was muscle memory. The robber behind him snapped, slammed a fist against the seat. "I said highway, old man." You deaf Howard's eyes met his in the mirror. Just for a second, just long enough, the kind of look that made killers hesitate. Then, quietly, almost like a sigh, he said, "This way's faster." But Howard wasn't following a road. He was following a memory. A route burned into his bones. A place where he once survived, when no one else should have. The tattoo beneath his glove pulsed faintly now. The military ink, faded and quiet for years, seemed to wake, rising like smoke from fire that never died. The road narrowed. Streetlights vanished. Thorns scraped the sides of the bus like ghosts, dragging fingernails across the steel. Inside, no one dared speak. The only sound was breath and the low growl of an engine that didn't understand fear. Howard tilted his head, listening for something the others couldn't hear. A breeze slipped through the frame. The scent of damp earth and something older, something buried. He knew this road. I knew every curve, its every trap. It wasn't just asphalt. It was a battlefield. It was a memory. It was the place where boys became men, or didn't. And tonight, it would be the place where everything changed. The road narrowed, and the wheels of Bus 24C groaned beneath its weight. The paved city, long behind them. The bus crept over cracked dirt and soft earth. swallowed slowly by the forest that stretched behind South Branch Preserve. Bare oak trees reached skyward like skeletal arms, their twisted limbs clawing at the dark. Inside the cabin, silence ruled heavy. Breathless silence. Mr. Howard Lennox still sat behind the wheel, his face still carved in stone, but his eyes were alive. They scanned every curve, every broken route, every hidden shadow along the road. This wasn't unfamiliar ground, this was a memory. And memory had a scent, a rhythm, a pulse. Every turn, every bump, stirred something ancient inside him. He knew this place. Not just where it was, but what it was. A forgotten training ground, a battlefield with no markers, where the soil still remembered boots, and silence had once been broken by orders barked in the dark. Behind him, the passengers sat frozen. The whispering had stopped. Even fear seemed to hold its breath. The gunman, standing near Howard, grew restless. His voice snapped through the stillness. "What kind of road is this? You doing this on purpose?" Howard didn't answer. He shifted slightly, one gloved hand brushing the side of the driver's seat where a small, hidden compartment waited. Inside, an old folded map, its corners worn thin. Red ink marked ambush sites and escape trails. Next to it, a cold steel whistle. The same whistle that once guided 12 men through jungle nights, only 4 of whom made it home. Howard felt its weight, not just the metal, but the memories. Faces, screams, the sharp crack of gunfire against wet leaves. And that one night when the whistle saved them all, that memory wasn't fading, it was rising. He guided the bus through a sharp curve, where the path vanished under wet leaves and mud. Behind him, a girl's voice broke. The same girl who had mocked him earlier. She clutched her purse like a life raft. How would he even know this place, she whispered, trembling. "We're dead." Howard didn't flinch. He didn't need their belief. He needed time. The robber beside him stepped closer, gun twitching, voice thinning. "How do you know this road? Who are you?" Howard's voice slipped through the wind like a blade. "I've been driving a long time. I know every kind of road." The man backed away, not by choice, by instinct. Something in Howard's eyes wasn't old, it was ancient. At the back of the bus, the third robber started pacing. He peered out the windows, desperate for landmarks, but all he saw were trees, endless trees, and darkness that didn't feel empty, it felt full. Howard saw him falter, saw the uncertainty. It was working. He remembered something his commander once said, a whisper from long ago. The enemy is strongest when they feel certain. Make them doubt, and they'll crumble. That's exactly what he was doing. Doubt was seeping in, drop by drop. His fingers brushed the whistle again. He didn't need to fight. The forest would fight for him. The earth would betray them. And memory. Memory was the sharpest weapon of all. The road grew rough. The wheels dipped into the earth, mud grabbing at the tires like fingers trying to hold them in place. Inside, someone began to pray. Another wept quietly, but Howard's hands never wavered. His breath stayed calm. He wasn't just steering a bus. He was leading a convoy across the edge of the past. Up ahead, the trees gave way to a clearing. Pale moonlight spilled across wet ground, pooling into the outline of an old trap, mud deep enough to swallow tires, deep enough to stop anyone who didn't know better. Howard knew it. He remembered the day they buried the metal beneath that soil. He remembered the screams, and he remembered what followed. In the mirror. The robber gripped his weapon tighter, but he didn't know. Howard already held the upper hand. Quiet, steady, invisible, just like always. The bus groaned as it rolled into the clearing, its wheels sinking deeper into the soft, muddy ground. Faint moonlight shimmered across the wet earth like a warning, and the forest around them closed in dark, silent, watchful. Mr. Howard Lennox remained at the wheel, leather gloves firm against the grip. His face was still calm, but beneath the silence of his skin, his heartbeat was in steady rhythm, not from fear, but readiness like a soldier stepping into the familiar fire. Inside the bus, no one spoke. Passengers sat frozen, their breath shallow, fingers clenching purses and coat sleeves. The three men with guns so bold when they stepped on now shifted uneasily. Their power was slipping, and they knew it. The man closest to Howard snapped panic in his voice. "Stop the bus! What's wrong with the engine?" Howard didn't answer right away. He tilted his head slightly, listening, not to the engine, to the forest, to the air, to something older. Then, without haste, he pressed the brake. The wheels spun once, twice, and then sank into the earth. The bus stopped. "Engines shot?" he said quietly. "This road's too old." The man cursed, slamming a fist into the seat. Howard didn't blink. In the mirror, he saw the second gunman stalking toward the back, trying to reassert control. The third youngest of the three lingered by the door, eyes darting. He was sweating now. He was watching shadows move, and Howard knew. The time had come. Without a word, his hand slid beside the seat into the hidden metal box. His fingers wrapped around the cold steel whistle worn, old, but not forgotten. He raised it, one breath, one sharp note, not loud, but clear, cutting through the trees like a blade through fog. No one else understood what it meant. But Howard did. So might someone else, someone waiting at the ranger station miles away. He didn't need a rescue, just a signal, just time. The young robber flinched. "Go check it," he barked. The man beside Howard grunted, pushed open the door, and stepped into the clearing into the trap. The mud swallowed his boots instantly. He stumbled, cursed, and tried to move. But the more he struggled, the deeper he sank. Howard watched, eyes narrowed. There wasn't just soft ground. It was one of the old lessons laid down decades ago to teach young soldiers how to stop enemies without firing a shot. Panic bloomed. The two remaining men rushed forward, guns raised, waving them wildly, no longer in control, no longer predators, just men, afraid, surrounded by a forest they didn't understand. Howard spoke then, quiet, but sharp enough to cut steel. "I've led a lot of cocky ones down this road. None of them walked out the same." The words hung in the air like smoke. The man beside him jolted, pressed the barrel harder against Howard's head. But his hand, it was trembling. Howard didn't look at him. His eyes were fixed outside, on the sinking man, on the clearing, on something deeper in the trees, a flicker, far off, then again closer, headlights, weak at first, but growing stronger, a ranger truck coming down the old path, tires crunching earth, light piercing the woods. Inside the bus, something shifted. Fear hadn't gone, but it had changed shape. The passengers, once crushed under helplessness, began to feel something else. A question, a dawning realization. The young woman who had mocked Howard now stared at him wide-eyed. She was no longer certain of anything she thought she knew. At the back, the second robber screamed, "Pull him out. Get back on." But Howard didn't move, didn't speak, because he didn't need to. The road was speaking now. The forest was answering. Every turn, every breath, every sinking wheel had been his plan. Since the moment they forced him to turn away from the highway, he had been guiding them not to escape, but to end here, in the place that had made him. The barrel still hovered by his temple, but Howard had faced worse. Gunfire, ambushes, nights with no dawn. And now he had something more powerful than fear. He had time, and time was on his side. Darkness swallowed the South Branch Preserve, the only light filtering through branches like strands of silver thread. Bus 24C sat still, half buried in mud, tilted slightly, like a creature that had crawled too far into enemy territory. The young robber outside thrashed wildly, crying for help. His legs sunk deep into the old training pit that Howard Lennox had led him to. Inside, the air was tight. No one spoke. The smell of sweat, fear, and forest soil clung to everything. The man beside the driver yelled, gun trembling in his hand. "What the hell are you doing, old man?" Howard didn't answer. He didn't need to. His eyes remained locked on the rearview mirror where flickers of light began to dance far off between the trees. A man halfway down the aisle slowly stood, young, maybe 30, worn jacket, ordinary at first glance, but not his eyes. His eyes had seen something, and when they met Howard in the mirror, they understood each other. The old insignia, partially hidden beneath Howard's glove, caught the light for just a second. The 75th Ranger Regiment. A symbol this young man had only heard about in stories told by his father. He gave the smallest nod and moved. Silently, deliberately. He slipped down the aisle. The second robber at the back never saw it coming. His grip on the gun had already weakened his thoughts tangled in panic. With trained motion, the young man lunged, twisted, and disarmed him. The robber screamed, but no one moved. The man near Howard spun, raising his weapon, but Howard had already risen. In one smooth motion, he grabbed the man's wrist, twisted it, and the gun clattered to the floor. The man gasped. Howard's voice was soft, but it landed like thunder. "Sit down. Don't make me do that again." The passengers froze. The young woman who once laughed at him now held her purse like a shield. Her wide eyes locked on his face. The man in the crisp suit, who had barked into his phone that morning, now looked down, hand covering his mouth. They didn't see an old man anymore. They saw something else, something they couldn't name. Howard didn't look at them. He walked slowly off the bus, eyes fixed forward as Ranger headlights cut through the dark like a second sunrise. His whistle had spoken, and the forest had listened. The Ranger truck pulled in. Doors opened. Officers moved with purpose, not weapons drawn, but ready. They pulled the man from the mud and restrained the other two, working in sync with the young passenger who had stepped forward without hesitation. No bullets were fired. No violence is needed. Just understanding and precision. As the dust settled, one of the Rangers, older, gray at the edges, turned toward him. His eyes narrowed, then widened. Lennox Howard. Lennox Howard gave a slight nod. Nothing more. The others didn't hear it, but they saw the look. The whispers started. A name passed from seat to seat. The man in the suit stood silently, blinking against tears. The girl lowered her head, ashamed of the words she'd written and the photo she'd posted. They wanted to apologize, but it no longer felt like enough. Police arrived. Statements were taken. A young officer approached Howard, offering a public thank you, maybe even a ceremony. Howard shook his head. His voice, calm and deliberate, cut through the cold like a blade through cloth. If you're a decent man, you drive slow enough to see who's in trouble. No one answered. No one had to. That single sentence hung in the cabin like scripture. And for the first time since the morning, silence returned, not from fear, but from reverence. Howard climbed back aboard the bus, checked the mirrors, straightened the wheel like a man finishing a shift, nothing more, nothing less. Inside his chest, the storm he'd buried all these years was finally still. He hadn't done it for glory or recognition. He'd done it for the people in those seats, for the memory of those who'd once walked beside him, and for a kind of honor the world had long forgotten how to see. The ranger lights faded behind the trees, the whispers died away, and the forest, as it always did, returned to silence as if no battle had ever been fought, and no legend had just passed through. Dawn crept softly over Collins Street in Joliet, Illinois. Light pooled gently across the sidewalks, washing the brick storefronts in gold. And Bus 24C, caked in mud from the South Branch Preserve, was towed silently back to the depot. The wheels still wore the dirt of last night's memory, as if unwilling to let go. But the driver's seat was empty now. That morning, Mr. Howard Lennox walked into the bus company office. No fanfare, no explanation. He left his keys, his worn leather gloves, and a small notebook filled with handwritten route notes. He gave the supervisor a single nod, then stepped back into the morning light. His figure slightly hunched, fading quietly into the rhythm of the city. No one knew where he went, and he never said goodbye. In the days that followed, the town whispered his name. Passengers from that night told the story again and again of the old driver who led them away from death's doorstep. Their voices didn't rise, but they held a reverence no one could fake. The girl who once snapped his photo posted a long apology. She shared a new image now. Howard standing beneath the ranger lights, eyes like sharpened steel. The man in the crisp suit. He sat alone in a coffee shop on Jefferson Avenue, repeating to anyone who'd listen, "I was wrong. I owe that man my life." But Howard wasn't there to hear it. A week later, Route 24C was renamed. A new sign went up at the stop near Pilcher Park. Its letters are carved into steel Lennox route for the watchful ones, just a name, no story. But in silence, it said everything. Inside the bus, mounted above the driver's seat, was a small plaque, just a few words, etched deep into metal. For the one who once drove and once saved a whole bus with silence. New passengers, those who never knew him, would glance at it and wonder. They'd never know the road he chose, or the price he carried, or how, in the darkest hour. He turned a bus into a battleground and never raised his voice. Some say they've seen him since. An old man, silver hair brushing his collar, sitting alone at the Veterans Cemetery off Cass Street. Always in the same place, among the stones, facing west toward the forest. They don't approach, they don't speak. They only watch as he places one hand on a headstone, and with the other, gently brushes the edge of a faded tattoo beneath the skin. The silver star, never worn, still rests inside a wooden box at home, just like the memories he never shared. The South Branch Preserve is quiet now. The mud pits have dried. The trails are marked for hikers, the forest reclaimed by deer and wind, but every time the new bus rolls down Theodore Avenue, someone always glances toward the driver's seat expecting, just for a moment, to see him there. They never do, but the silence he left behind, that never left. It clings to the windows. It lives in the engine's hum. It rests on the small plaque above the wheel, a story not shouted, but remembered like moonlight across the muddy ground, soft, steady, and eternal. And each evening, when golden light drapes Collins Street again, the bus bearing the name Lennox Route rolls on without a sound. That plaque still there, untouched, honoring the man who saved a bus not with force but with patience, with instinct, with honor. Mr. Howard Lennox never returned. But his story, like the wind that moves through South Branch Preserve, still echoes softly in the hearts of those who remember. Honor, sacrifice, dignity, they don't need loud words, just a glance, an old road, and a heart that never stopped beating for others. If this story moved you, share it. I hope that men like Mr. Howard will never be forgotten. Subscribe to this channel and help us keep telling stories of quiet courage. And in the comments, tell us who is your Howard, who showed you strength, not with noise but with stillness. Every story you share keeps the moonlight burning, like it did that night when silence saved them all.